Good afternoon and welcome to the Assembly of Osteopathic Graduate Medical Educators AOGME webinar series. We are pleased to have you join us for this AOGME webinar on ERAS updates and program signaling featuring Blythe Jonas, Michelle Osterheld, Richard Pang, and Jamie Bograd of the AAMC. My name is Austin Wetmore. I'm the Program Manager for GME Initiatives at ACOM, and I will help facilitate this webinar. Before we get started, I would like to review a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted on the AOGME webpage shortly. All webinar participants are in listen-only mode. If you experience technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat feature and we will assist you. If you have questions for the speakers during the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A feature at any time. If time permits at the end of the webinar, the speakers will respond to your questions. I will now briefly introduce our AAMC presenters. Dr. Blythe Jonas is an ERAS Outreach and Engagement Manager. Michelle Osterheld is the Director of Strategy and Engagement for ERAS. Richard Pang is an ERAS Outreach and Engagement Manager. And Jamie Bograd is a Director of Pilot Administration in the Admissions and Selection Research and Development Program. Thank you again to all four of our speakers for being with us today and for preparing this presentation. With that, I will turn it over to the speakers.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're happy that you all could join us for some updates about ERAS for the upcoming application season. Richard, if you could advance the slide. So our objectives for today's presentation are to share ERAS's strategic focus and priorities, to present the upcoming changes to the ERAS application that you will see for the upcoming season, including signaling, geographic preferences, and updates to the experiences section. We will be presenting research findings from the last cycle of the ERAS supplemental application, as well as indicating what's ahead for the PDWS for the upcoming season. So before we get into the details of the changes for the upcoming season, I did want to take a moment to review the timeline for the 2024 application season and highlight some important dates that you will want to note moving forward. ERAS account maintenance opened on April 6th, and the deadline for specialties to finalize the number of program signals they will be using in this upcoming cycle was April 11th. So you will see finalized information about that in today's presentation. On May 31st at 5 p.m. Is the end of the current 2023 application season. ERAS will shut down and it will open again on June 7th at 9 a.m. On June 30th is an important date. That's the deadline for programs to opt in to program signaling for the upcoming season. We'll talk a little bit more about that in today's presentation. And then on September 6th is when residency applications may begin submitting their applications to programs in the MyERAS system, starting at 9 a.m. And programs can begin reviewing those applications and MSPEs in the PDWS at 9 a.m. on September 27th. Some dates to note, actually, we've already moved on from that slide. However, we know that program outages can be very disruptive, so we did want to give you a heads up about some dates for our December cycle rollover when ERAS will not be available. And those are November 3rd, 2023 at 5 p.m. through November 6th at 9 a.m. So those are important dates to note just to ensure that, that you work around those dates because the system will not be available. So as we move into the changes for the upcoming cycle and beyond, ERAS keeps three main priorities in mind. And these are the framework for all of the changes that we are implementing and discussing today. The first is that ERAS is focusing on providing a suite of products and tools that support the residency and fellowship selection process that are adaptable to the changing needs of this community in terms of the transition to residency. The second focus of ERAS during this time is data analytics. So we're seeking to provide data and information that helps to drive informed decision-making for all impacted parties. And additionally, we're focusing on thought, leadership, and research to lead the residency and fellowship community by identifying the priority issues and enabling coordination, information sharing, and innovation to help address some of the challenges that are currently found within the residency application system. Next slide. To that end, we did announce last week that AAMC has entered a new strategic collaboration with Thalamus. Our goal for this collaboration is to accelerate our innovation across the transition to residency process. We want to be able to leverage the data, technology, and expertise of Thalamus, as well as increase transparency in the process. Our ultimate goal is to be supporting holistic review through improving products that are available to all users in the system, improving the learner experience by consolidating the interview management process, which is currently fragmented across several systems, and to be able to support specialty-specific policies and timelines, such as streamlined interview release dates and other innovations that are being discussed. To this end, the collaboration with Thalamus means that programs will have complimentary access to Thalamus Core, which is their interview management platform, to the Itinerary Wizard, which is used to generate applicants and faculty interview schedules with links, as well as Cerebellum, which is their data and analytics dashboard that provides information about diversity, equity, inclusivity, and geographic recruitment outcomes. Some important dates to know for the timeline for the strategic collaboration. For the 2024 season, programs will have the option to switch to Core, but the PDWS interview scheduler will still be available to those programs who wish to use it. From May through June, institutions and programs can complete the interest form. And on June 21st, onboarding will begin for the Thalamus products. Starting in season 2025, Thalamus Core will be replacing the PDWS interview scheduler. For Cerebellum in 2024, programs using Thalamus Core will have their data available for Cerebellum reports. And starting in 2025, reports for all ERAS participating programs and institutions will be available through Cerebellum. So as we head into a summary of the different updates for the ERAS application, we wanted to talk a little bit about what has been, what the drivers are for that change. So the ERAS application has been the same for over 20 years. So it was clearly time to update that application. The goals for some of these updates are to make the questions more relevant to the current context of medical training and the residency application process. To provide applicants with efficient and structured ways to share more of their history and information with programs, and also to provide programs with structured data that they can use to conduct mission-aligned holistic review. So for the past 2 seasons, you've seen the supplemental application as the place where these changes are occurring, and this year they are moving into the main ERAS application. So just a global overview of the changes that you will see in MyERAS for the 2024 cycle. For residency applicants, there is an updated experience section. There is new geographic information that is present in the application, as well as standardized location information throughout the application, and program signals are available for select specialties. Fellowship applicants will have some of these changes, but not all of them. So for fellowship applications, and for those of you who receive fellowship applications in your program, you will see that applicants have access to the updated experiences section, as well as the new geographic information, but program signals are not available at this time for fellowship applicants. As these changes were implemented and evaluated, many people across the community have been involved in this work over the past few years, including DO representation at both the program director and student level. So we want to thank everybody that's contributed, shared feedback, and participated in all of the working groups and surveys that we have used to gather information about these changes and optimize the application moving forward. So we received thousands of survey responses. There have been many working group meetings, and we've gone through a thorough methodology to evaluate the changes and continue to refine them as we move forward through this process. So now I want to get into the first of the three sections of changes, which is experience. So the goals for the experiences section is to provide applicants the opportunity to more clearly and concisely communicate to programs who they are, their interests, and accomplishments. This allows them to highlight their most meaningful experiences, and it allows programs to gather this information in a way that supports and drives holistic review. As a part of our evaluation of the changes that were in the supplemental application, a survey was sent out to program directors and students about their usage of the supplemental applications. We wanted to share some of that data with you to provide some context about the way that these changes are being implemented and used by programs. So program directors completed a survey about their experiences back in November and December of 2022. And this information is derived from those survey responses. Program directors from 985 programs contributed to this data. So within this data, you can see that 94% of responding programs used the enhanced experiences section as a part of their holistic application review to determine who to interview. 79% of responding programs indicated they used it as a tiebreaker to decide whom to interview, and 87% used it as a part of their preparation for the interview. It's important to note that 70% of responding programs thought the experiences responses helped them get a better picture of each applicant. Additionally, more than 60% of applicant respondents agreed or strongly agreed that the experience types, focus areas, and key characteristics tags allowed them to showcase what was important to them as applicants. So this slide is going to go over some important changes that you need to note for the upcoming application season. First of all, the experiences section allows applicants to submit 10 experience entries that communicate who they are and what is most important to them. Within those experiences, they can provide descriptive information, select an experience type, a primary focus area, and a key characteristic. They can briefly describe their activities, responsibilities, and the context of those experiences. From those 10 experiences, they can select up to 3 to provide additional information. From there, they will write a short essay that reflects on the experience, why it was meaningful, and how it influenced them as applicants. Then, if applicable, an applicant can add an entry to the impactful experience section, and that provides them with the opportunity to describe any challenges or hardships that influenced their journey to residency. This can include experiences related to family background, financial circumstances, community settings, educational experiences, or any other general life experiences that presented a hardship to them on their journey through medical school. Additionally, in the experiences section, there are new experience types, primary focus areas, and key characteristics that students can attach to their application experiences to provide more context to those experiences. So as you may know, in previous applications, students had the ability to designate work, research, and volunteer experience. In addition to that, in the upcoming application, students can indicate education and training experience, military service, extracurricular clubs or hobbies, professional organizations, and teaching and mentoring. They can designate primary focus areas and key characteristics for each of these experiences. This data also provides program directors with the ability to filter on these criteria that match their program's mission or any characteristics that are particularly important to their program. The next section of changes to the application are geographic preferences. The goals for geographic and setting preferences are to provide applicants with a structured way to indicate the geographical region where they would like to train and the importance of that region to them. Prior to 2024, the MyERAS application captured and reported applicants' geographic information in a variety of methods, and residency and fellowship programs were left to make inferences about where an applicant wanted to train based on where they may have lived or worked in the past. This upcoming change for the current cycle and allowing applicants to indicate their geographic preference allows them to state directly where they would like to train, because we know that literature, focus groups, and surveys indicate that geography is a very important part of residency decisions, and it's very important to residency and fellowship program directors as well. So hopefully our goal is to allow applicants to more clearly indicate this preference on their application. Again, survey information from the survey that I referenced earlier in the presentation provides us with some data about how this information was used by programs. So 94% of responding programs indicated that this information was used as a part of their holistic application review to decide whom to interview. 88% of responding programs listed it as a tiebreaker to help them decide who to interview, and 70% of programs used geographic preferences to help them prepare for the interview. 82% of responding programs agreed that geographic preferences helped them identify applicants they would have otherwise overlooked. So it does help applicants get noticed in a way that they may not have before. In terms of applicant feedback on applicant surveys, nearly 90% of respondents reported that had they been given the opportunity to report different geographic preferences to every specialty to which they are applied, their geographic preferences would not change. So they're reporting their true preferences as they go through this application process. As we move forward to provide more information about geographic preferences and geographic division, there is some additional information that's important to know about the application. Applicants can select up to 3 geographic divisions that are based on U.S. Census divisions, or they can indicate no preference. Along with each of these preferences, a short description can be used to provide explanation or additional context for their preferences. Here's a breakdown of what programs can see. If an applicant selects a geographic division, programs within that division will see that applicant's preference and their explanation if they provided one. Programs outside of that division will not see any information displayed. If an applicant indicates they have no geographical preference, that information and any explanation provided will be visible to every program where they apply. If an applicant skips the geographical preference section, no information is displayed to any of their applications, the programs to which they apply. Additionally, so there's geographic preference, there is also a setting preference that is meant to indicate a degree of preference for an urban or rural setting, or applicants can indicate no preference along that continuum. Applicants can also skip this question if they do not have a preference in that area. Programs will see the setting and the explanation selected by the applicant. These preferences provide programs with additional data directly from the applicant expressing interest about where they want to spend their future. On the third section of this slide, you can see there is an area where there is additional enhanced information and some changes that are happening in the ERAS application. And that pertains to the way that location information is standardized across the application. Rather than collecting different types of location information in different formats in different parts of the application, applicants this year will be using standardized fields to share location information for all sections. So that standard collection of information is going to include country, state, city, postal code, and setting. And that applies to location information given in the following sections: addresses, hometowns, experiences, education, and training. In the prior versions of the application, several of these sections were open text fields, which limited how programs could use this data in their analysis of the geographic preferences of applicants. Next, we're going to move on to program signals. So at its core level, a program signal is the ability for an applicant to express interest in a particular residency program at the time of application. By now, most of us are somewhat familiar with this due to the fact that it was present in the supplemental application 2 years ago and last year. But just to refresh everybody's memory, program signals have been designed with the goal of giving applicants a structured opportunity to indicate their true or genuine interest in a program at the time of application. It's important to keep in mind that at the time of application, it's a reflection of their interest at the time of application, but applicants' interests do change at different parts of the application cycle, and a program signal should not be used beyond the point of deciding whether or not to interview an applicant. Program signals are intended to be used as a single data point alongside all of the other information in the applicant and should not be used in isolation when deciding who to interview. It's important to remember that signals are an application. They're an indicator of the fact that an applicant wants the program to know how much they are interested in that program. As a reminder of what programs are going to see with a program signal. Program signals will be reported such that a program will only know if an applicant signaled their program. Programs cannot see the other programs that an applicant signals. If the applicant signals the program will see the word yes in PDWS, or if the program is participating in a specialty that is doing tiered signaling, so gold and silver levels of signals, the program will see gold or silver rather than the yes option for the program signal. If an applicant does not signal a program, signals a different program, or skips signaling, the program will receive no information. So moving on, we do have some data from the program director survey about the utilization of program signals in this in prior years. So 88% of responding programs used program signals as a screening tool before a more thorough application review. 86% used program signals as a tiebreaker to help them decide whom to interview, and 64% used program signals during the interview to learn more about why an applicant signaled their program. 75% of responding programs agreed that program signals help them identify applicants they would have otherwise overlooked. And then in terms of applicant feedback, over 80% of respondents who submitted program signals noted that their signals reflected their true preferences at the time of their application. And 64% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that program signals may help them be noticed by programs in which they have the most interest. On the next slide, you can see a summary of the different specialty participation in the program signaling for the 2024 season. Residency applications will have the opportunity to signal programs in the 22 specialties that you see on screen here. As an example, for family medicine, applicants will be able to signal 5 programs of interest for the ERAS 2024 application cycle. If that same applicant were to dual apply also in internal medicine, then that applicant would also be able to signal 7 internal medicine programs, as well as the 5 family medicine programs that they signaled. I want to draw everybody's attention to an update in our guidance for home and away signaling, for programs for home institutions and programs where students did away rotations. So as you know or may know, in prior years, there was varied guidance given by specialties about whether or not a student should signal a program at their home institution or where they did an away rotation. For the upcoming season, it is AAMC's guidance that a student or applicant should signal any program they are interested in, including their home program and including any sites where they may have completed an away rotation. We believe this is the most fair and equitable process for all applicant types, including MD students, DO students, and IMGs, and provides programs fair information across the board about applicants' interests in their program, regardless of whether it's their home institution or whether they completed an away rotation. The number of program signals that you see on this screen was determined through specialty leadership and in collaboration with AAMC assessment experts who worked together to ensure that an informed decision was made about the appropriate number of signals for individual specialties. Specialty leadership determined these numbers based on their goals of the number of programs within their specialty and the average number of applications that were submitted in their specialty. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jamie Bograd, the Director of Pilot Administration for AAMC's Admission Selection and Research Development Team, to talk more about the data and research we have thus far on program signaling.
Thank you, Blythe. Thanks, Richard. I'll discuss this slide first. As many of you know, I spent a few years at AACOM and I heard really great feedback last week about your AACOM annual conference. So first, I just wanted to say congratulations. And today I'm going to go share some data that helps quantify the relationship between geographic preferences, program signals, and being invited to an interview. Because our time is limited today, I'm only going to show you the data for a few specialties. We've carefully chosen specialties which had higher percentages of DO applicants among the 16 participating supplemental ERAS application specialties. And all of this data for every specialty will be shared through the Residency Explorer tool for the upcoming season by specialty. However, even though I don't have time to walk through all specialties, the trends we're about to see are largely applicable to all specialties that participated in program signals this year, as well as last year. However, the magnitude of the effect that you're going to see does vary across specialties, which is why it's important to carefully take a look at each specialty's data individually. So our key takeaways, based on the research and feedback, programs are looking for applicants to indicate their true preferences and intentions. For those of you that are advisors here, we continue to advise your applicants to be honest and share their true preferences. Applicants are using a variety of experience types, key characteristics, and focus areas. And there's no one blueprint that applicants are using that is exactly what a program wants to see. You know better than anyone else that each of your applicants is unique, and the newly designed experience section is allowing applicants to share their individuality in a new and standardized way. It structures the collection of information from applicants to help programs while trying to understand a mission fit. We also noticed that geographic preferences are working as they were designed to. For the first time, as Blythe mentioned, applicants are able to express the programs, the regions of the area of the country where they want to be and why. Perhaps that they have support systems, family or friends in the area, and this is assisting programs by helping them identify applicants that they may have otherwise overlooked or who may be a better fit for their program's location. In most specialties, geographic preference alignment and no preference resulted in a higher probability of interview invitation. There are 5 specialties that this did not apply to, which is very slightly misaligned. That is adult neurology, interventional radiology, peds, IM, and general surgery. When considering geographic preferences alone, the highest likelihood of interview invitation occurred when an applicant's geographic preference aligned with the program's location. Program signals are also working as they were designed and intended to. In all specialties, sending a signal increased the likelihood of an interview invitation. When considering geographic preference and program signals together, the highest likelihood of an interview invitation occurred when an applicant signaled the program and their geographic preference aligned with the program's location. We also want to point out there's little to no group differences by applicant type, MD, DO, IMG, race, ethnicity, and gender. Most applicants send the maximum number of signals. MD applicants sent slightly more signals than DO applicants in interventional radiology and orthopedic surgery. And MDs sent slightly more signals than IMGs in emergency medicine, interventional radiology, OB-GYN, orthopedic surgery, and psychiatry. So first, let's set the stage by sharing how we conducted the analysis. Results were analyzed separately by program because we know that applicant pools and selection processes differ by program. We conducted our analysis individually by each program within a specialty, and then we aggregated across programs by computing a median probability or receiving an invite to interview, as well as the 10th and 90th percentile amongst the program distribution. So those of you that are familiar with meta-analysis, you can think of this as a very similar, process to meta-analysis. We did hundreds of little studies, each of those studies reflecting an individual program, and then we combined their data across all programs within a specialty. The work we did was driven by a logistical regression, and we chose that methodology because the outcome of interest is binary. It's whether someone was selected for interview or not. So we used two logical regressions to estimate these relationships, looking at interview invitation, program signals, and geographic preferences. Today, I'm going to report to you the results from those logistical regressions where we took the primary variables that are listed on the slide here. And then in future publications and in future report outs, we'll also talk about other models where we look at differences by race, ethnicity, gender, and applicant type. Again, we can share that the results that we talk about today hold across all all applicant types. So first, I'm going to talk about emergency medicine. The y-axis is the predicted probability of being invited to an interview based on the logistic regressions we ran. The x-axis is whether or not the applicant sent a signal. Last year, emergency medicine elected not to participate in geographic preferences. Please note this year for 2024, all applicants to all specialties, including emergency medicine, will have the opportunity to share their geographic preferences. So back to the chart, the line plotted here represents whether or not an applicant sent a program signal. And please note the dotted lines. These dotted lines represent the strong variation across programs. Plotted is the median predicted probability based on whether the applicant signaled across all of those 236 programs that were included. The size of the dotted line indicates the amount of variability in the program distribution. So the takeaway here is when we look at the purple line, we should note that sending a program signal does not guarantee an interview, nor does not sending a signal prevent an interview invitation. Sending a signal increased an applicant's predicted probability of invited to interview. If you sent a signal, the median predicted probability of being invited was 63%, compared to those applicants who did not signal a program, their median probability of an interview invitation was 32% for emergency medicine. Please note that we are also separately actively working with emergency medicine specialty leadership around research and their applications. As we know, there were some surprises for emergency medicine this cycle. Next, I'm going to share the same slide for obstetrics and gynecology. Please note, for those of you that are not familiar with OB-GYN signals, they opted for a slightly different process than most specialties this year. They had a gold and a silver, a gold indicating the most interest and silver indicating interested. So here are the results. The y-axis is the predicted probability of being invited to interview based on the logistical regressions we ran. Last year, again, OB-GYN, just like emergency medicine, elected not to participate in geographic preferences. Plotted is the median predicted probability based on whether an applicant signaled across all the 204 programs that were included. So when you take a look at the purple line, we should note that program signals does not guarantee an interview invitation, nor does sending a signal prevent an interview invitation. Sending a signal, again, increased an applicant's predicted probability of being invited to interview, with gold having the highest effect. If you sent a silver signal, the median predicted probability of being invited was 31%. If you sent a gold signal, the median predicted probability of being invited was 56%, compared to those applicants that did not signal, whose median probability predicted was 5%. Here's physical medicine and rehabilitation. The takeaways here, when we compare the yellow and the purple line, we should note that sending a program signal, again, does not guarantee an interview invitation, nor does sending a signal prevent an interview invitation. Sending a signal increased an applicant's predicted probability of invited to interview, regardless of whether they sent a geographic preference, and you'll see that it was a substantial effect across the board. If you sent a signal and your geographic preference aligned with the program's location, the median predicted probability of being invited for interview was 56%, compared to those applicants who did not have an aligned geographic preference, whose median predicted probability of interview invitation was 27%. So having an aligned geographic preference or no geographic preference, meaning you were willing to go anywhere, increases the odds of being invited to interview regardless of program signals. And you can see that by looking left to right on screen. It's important to point out that we are observing a difference in interview rates based on a tool that measures something. So this is the first time you're seeing the slide about geographic preferences, and that we believe geographic preferences are accurately helping the applicant identify what's important to them. I think this is my last slide and this is orthopedic surgery. You'll note, for those of you that are not familiar, orthopedic surgery was different from most other specialties last year, that they went with a high number of program signals. 30 program signals is what orthopedic surgery used. And so when we compare the yellow and purple line, we should note that sending a program signal, again, does not guarantee an interview invitation, nor does not sending a signal prevent an interview invitation, but that is much lower in orthopedic surgery. Sending a signal increased an applicant's predicted probability of invite to interview, regardless of whether they sent a geographic preference, and you'll see that there was still substantial across the board. If you sent a signal and your geographic preference aligned with the program's location, the median predicted probability of being invited to interview was 23%, compared to those applicants who did not have an aligned geographic preference, whose median predicted probability of interview invitation was 12%. So having an aligned geographic preference or no geographic preference, meaning you were willing to go anywhere, does increase the odds of being invited to interview regardless of program signaling. And again, you can see that by looking left to right on screen. Like I said earlier, those were the specialties that had the highest amount of DOs, and that's why we chose to share those with you in the limited amount of time that we have. All of these will be available in the Residency Explorer, and hopefully we can I believe we're sharing this slide deck with you as well. There were some questions also that we got before the meeting about interviews and what might the AAMC recommend for interviews in the GME space for 2024. So as you know, before 2020, most medical schools and residency and fellowship programs wouldn't have dreamt of conducting their admissions process or residency selection process virtually. And schools and programs rose to that challenge with innovation, creativity, and open minds. Schools were able to effectively adopt to a virtual interview format. Now in this post-COVID era, schools and programs are faced with that choice of interview formats, and we know that each of them have unique pros and cons. Before I share what the AAMC recommended for the GME space, we did have an interview working group. We started meeting in early fall 2022. We had UME and GME community representative on screen. You'll see who our working members were. And then our recommendation on the next slide, in addition to updating interview resources, the AAMC will be issuing a values-based recommendation to the GME community supporting the continued use of virtual interviews when appropriate for an institution's needs, missions, and values. The recommendation is expected to go live early next week. We continue to believe that reducing the cost of interviewing is a critical step in widening access and improving equity for applicants. Our surveys indicate that applicants prefer virtual interviews, And this is consistent with our commitment to reduce an environmental impact. However, we do understand that this may not be the right choice for all schools and all programs due to circumstances at their institution in their specialty. So what's best for one school or program might not be best for another. And everyone may evaluate the pros and cons of those interview formats and decide on a different approach for good reasons. Lastly, I just wanted to share all of the slides that you see here. The information is readily available on our websites. You can take a screenshot or take a picture, and you can go directly to our data and reports for the supplemental ERAS application. You can learn about what's new in the MyERAS application for programs and what's new in the MyERAS application for applicants as well. We also want to highlight that we have a webinar on May 4th for programs at 2 p.m., which is tomorrow. I'm going to turn it back over to Austin and Richard to facilitate Q&A.
Yeah, we just have one question that came in. What about those programs that blatantly state that they do not accept COMLEX? Is that a violation?
Hey, Austin, I can try to address that question. As you all know, I came from the osteopathic community as an advisor, and I'm well aware of how frustrating that particular circumstance is when programs have those requirements. However, that is not, ERAS does not dictate program requirements. And so as it currently stands, that would not be a violation of ERAS policy. However, hopefully with continued practice, it becomes less.
Thanks, Blythe. And then there's one other question about when is the AAMC webinar for students?
I can take this question in terms of the webinar for applicants. We're still kind of carving out our schedule and timeline for webinars for this upcoming season, but typically for applicants, we're aiming for the end of June. So that'll be after the actual season opening in terms of when they get their tokens and they're able to get in the system, but also it gives them a little time to take a look at the application before we kind of do a rundown of the application process. I do want to also make a plug just to reiterate what Jamie shared earlier in terms of what you see on the slide here. These QR codes are all the information that's available here, but in addition to that, there are some resources that are available here that may be useful for applicants who'd like to get a head start. So there's a worksheet that is a representation of what the MyERAS application is with those new content change updates. And additionally, there's a few short videos too as well to again showcase that workflow and process an applicant might experience when they're inputting, let's say, for example, their geographic information or setting preference or those new experience types that Blythe mentioned earlier.
And we had one question about, are there any data on how this will help with diversity?
I think I can take the question. I'm not really sure. Are we talking about program signals and geographic preferences and experiences? Or are we talking about the ERAS application in general? But I can tell you that from our research with the supplemental application, which hopefully we articulated will no longer be, there were not differences by gender or by applicant type.
And just want to add to Jamie's point too as well in terms of the experiences. I think what's really cool to highlight is one of the key takeaways that she mentioned earlier in terms of the diversity and the experience types that were gathered from the application. And so just this is kind of like tying it back to the original point that Blythe had made about one of the goals of the update to the application, which is to promote holistic review, which in other terms really is just to be able to identify different criteria and values that sync between the applicants' experiences and the program's goals and missions.
Then we had another question. Are we able to use a practice token now to look over and use to teach at our institutions?
Yep, for the application, and just to kind of level set the question, I believe the practice token is referring to the Dean's Office workstation. This is the tool that medical school advisors or DWS users would utilize to support applicants during the application process. And so one of the tools in there is a practice token that allows them to emulate the applicant experience, essentially. So right now, if you went to DWS, it still reflects the current application season. The date that you want to look for is that season opening date on June 7th. Once we turn over to the new season and the DWS system, the Dean's Office workstation, along with the rest of the ERAS platforms to as well reflect the new season, that practice token will be definitely a key tool that DWS users or advisors can potentially use to, again, emulate that applicant experience and see what that new kind of content update looks like in terms of the experience, the geographic information preferences, and things of that nature.
And then we had a question about, can programs signal students, applicants?
Happy to answer that, Richard. Program signals are not bi-directional. So applicants can signal whether they are interested in programs, and programs are to use that before interview stage only. We try to give as much information to programs and ask them to read our materials before they opt in to program signals, but they're really to convey interest in programs because of the vast amount of applications they receive and the vast amount of applications that applicants send to programs. So they are not bi-directional.
I just actually want to backtrack just a little bit about the question about the AAMC webinar for applicants. So I mentioned more of the more technical webinar that we typically plan for each year for applicants, and it goes through the MyERAS application, it goes through the questions, the content, et cetera, et cetera. One other kind of webinar that I think would be great to plug here, and I'd like to shamelessly plug, is we're actually doing a joint webinar between the AAMC and the AMA. And this is traditionally what we've hosted in the past for the transition to residency webinar. And this will be on May 22nd. So definitely keep an eye out for communications, as with all of our updates and all of our webinars that we try to host for our constituents. Definitely communication is the best way to go. But this is just kind of a kind of putting this into your ears. If you are viewing your inbox and you see an email with us, that's definitely a great kind of webinar to promote to your students to keep an eye on in terms of upcoming changes for the season, just other tools and services that the AAMC has to offer to support students in that process.
And one last question. One question about the hobbies. Do you mind answering live? The question was, general experience has been that many interviews have used the hobbies section heavily in the past as a conversation point during interviews. Limiting it in this way seems unnecessary, as hobbies speak to more than just skill sets. It was also a small part of the application that was not assigned a large character count, so it does not seem to have made the application unnecessarily longer.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that live as well. I put the response in the chat. We did conduct mini focus groups with program directors and advisors and decided because hobbies was an unstructured way for programs to gather more information about an applicant, but not necessarily for selection. We didn't feel that it was relevant to burden the applicant with more questions. And this is a way of we are taking a look at the entire ERAS application. We have focused on these 3 sections first to ensure that it is as structured as possible to limit bias. And essentially, this was a area that both programs and advisors agreed that is beneficial for a conversation during interview, but not as beneficial for selection. And therefore, we felt that it was still important if applicants felt that it was one of their most important experiences, they could highlight that through structuredized format rather than an unstructured free text version.
And we had a couple questions come in through the chat. The first one is, with the new ERAS platform, will applicants reapplying from 2023 have their information transferred over like in past years if they register before May 31st?
I can take that question. So as in prior years, you will want to advise your applicants to certify and submit their application, but due to the application changes, it will change what is available to them in the new season. So in the new season, they will have access to their letters, their personal statements, and other components of the application that were not affected by the application changes. Additionally, they will be able to see a historical record of their application, but their application content will not transfer over into the 2024 form because there were too many changes to enable that to proceed. So some of that information will be there and some of it will not. So it's a changed process, but the advice to students should be the same, that they should certify and submit that application.
And then the second question was, has there been any insight into how boards will be relayed via ERAS? Some applicants having numerical scores and most having pass-fail?
That's a great question. So I think that this was probably going to be the 3rd year. I'm losing track, but the 3rd year that the board examinations have transitioned to a pass-fail. So there is kind of a mix of batch of applicants with numerical scores versus those with pass-fail. This is an ongoing effort in education on our part. Right now on the program side, they do have the ability to sort for applicants with both numerical scores and those applicants with pass-fail results too as well in the system. And in terms of our communication and efforts to educate for programs is to make sure they're aware that that may be the case in terms of this transition period where there are that mix of applicants. That being said, we'd love to hear feedback. We know that in the future, at least in terms of having the numerical scores versus pass-fail, you're going to have more and more with applicants with the pass-fail results, at least for those step 1s and level 1s. And so if there's any sort of feedback in terms of how that should be rendered on the program side, we're definitely keeping an eye out for that kind of feedback. We have heard from users in terms of what the community may have in preference to that, in terms of like around things like equity, things in terms of just like, again, just the transition in terms of moving to the pass-fail world. But yeah, as it is right now in the system, those two numerical scores and pass fails are rendered so that programs are able to find those that type of data.
Great, thank you so much. I think that takes care of all the questions that came in. So I guess we'll close the webinar. Thank you so much, Blythe, Jamie, Michelle, and Richard for this great presentation. And to all who joined us. If you have any further questions, please contact us directly at aogme@acom.org. This concludes our webinar. Thanks again to everyone who joined us and have a great evening. And again, this webinar, the recording of this webinar will be posted on the AOGME webpage shortly. Thank you.